Hello and welcome. Aquarister here, coming to you with another build video, and today we're going to be looking at Life Staff with Great Axe as a healer build. Now, this is one of my newer healer builds that I've been enjoying quite a bit, actually. I do use it a little bit for PvE, but primarily for OPR, 3v3, stuff like that. It's really revolved more around the PvP side, but still able to be used for the PvE side of things. So today we're going to be looking at the armor, jewelry, weapons, and just kind of the overall look at the build and some of the perks and stuff. So let's jump into it with the armor. All right, so looking at the armor, most of our perks and most of our armor will be focused little bit more towards the life staff side of things. We are starting with the hat, looking at the sagacious hat, in order to get our fortifying sacred ground, pretty essential ability to have as a healer. Sagacious shirt, then we get the shirking fortification, refreshing element version. These gloves do give us resilient, and the big thing I really liked was the shirking fortification. But for PvP, the resilient is also a really nice perk to have. For our pants, we do have insatiable gravity well. I actually got a steal on these pants. To have insatiable gravity well, freedom, and resilient with full focus was pretty awesome. I got them for really cheap. And then our boots have refreshing ward, mending protection. I do need to get some better boots, but for now, these have been working just fine. Ideally, I'd be looking for like a shirking fortification as well. So for armor, that's kind of what we're looking at. Our jewelry, this is my typical healer amulet that I wear. So we got the divine health and fortified. The fortified is really nice to have. I've found that extended fortification allows you to sit on your secondary a little bit longer, I feel, since you have just a few extra seconds of fortification that you can apply with the life staff. For my ring, it's my typical ring as well. Sacred Hardy, nature damage. You can swap out the nature damage for leeching or a different third perk, but I do highly recommend sticking with Sacred and Hardy for at least the two perks. For the earring, I've got Refreshing, Refreshing Toast, and Focused. Really, the only perk that I might swap out in the future is Refreshing for maybe Purifying Toast. Purifying Toast could come in handy, especially against some of the rapier users as they get their bleed stacks on me. I could remove that quite easily then and prevent the excess damage. If they're running that type of a build. Next, let's look at my weapons. So for weapons, it's really up to you as far as the life staff that you want to use. As long as it has Blessed on it, you can kind of get away with using what fits you best. You can use like Refreshing Divine Embrace, which I don't currently have on this build. I do need to fit that perk into this build, just haven't been able to yet. But if you run Mutated Dynasty, you can get, what is it, the Life Crystal, Life Staff, something like that. And that has Blessed, Refreshing Move, and Refreshing Divine Embrace. So ideally, I want to get that in order to then be able to just run that for my life staff primarily. For the Great Axe, I actually picked up this Great Axe also for a pretty good deal. We've got Crippling Reap, Plague Crits, Trenchant Rend. For the build that I'm running, the Crippling Reap and the Insatiable Gravity Well are two perks that I do highly recommend. If you have to pick between the two, I might push more towards the Crippling Reap personally, and I do like having it on the weapon specifically. The Insatiable Gravity Well, with the way that we're playing it, we don't really necessarily utilize its full damage output. It's more or less, our Gravity Well is more set up to set up plays. And so with the Insatiable Gravity Well, it really requires you, or it's pushing you to do more damage, obviously, but you're getting health back, and the more damage comes from the burst that's around you anyways, so you'd have to kind of be in there. So what you can do is throw a gravity well and then get into the mix right before it blows up and then get out. Totally up to you. But this Great Axe has worked really good for me as far as that goes. But perks to take note of: Life Staff, Fortifying Sacred Ground, Mending Protection you don't need, but it is nice. You will notice a little bit of an increase in healing output. And then Refreshing Divine Embrace, which I do have on a pair of gloves here, but I needed medium in order to keep my armor levels up. and hopefully I'll be able to farm some Mutated Dynasty and get that life staff, and then we'll be all set for most of these builds. All right, so next let's look at the attributes of this build. Looking at our attributes, you can see I'm at 50 strength, 300 focus, 117 con. The 117 con is kind of my standard that I run. That number is very specific, being that I use the 33 con foods that you can get from events. The Spice Nog was from the winter event. They have a sturgeon food from the summer event that you could buy when that was going on, and you can still buy them for gold. But the reason why I use these is oftentimes on the market, you're going to find that these are half or even lower than half the cost of the roasted rabbits. And roasted rabbits are 40 cons, so you're only losing out on 7 points, 7 attribute points. So it's not a huge difference. Honestly, those 7 points, I don't think you're going to notice a difference in OPR or something. Maybe in a war or something like that, you want to get as high as you can with those numbers. But for OPR, open world, anything like that, the 33 con for me has worked really, really well. And with the 300 focus, I do recommend 300. I don't recommend anything lower than that. I have tried lower focus, and you can heal a little bit, but the amount of damage that you're getting for the loss of the heals is not worth it. You're not really going to be doing that much more damage with your Great Axe. You might do a little bit more, but it's not going to be noticeable compared to those extra 50 points looking at focus. So that's kind of what we're looking at. But let's now look over at the actual weapon builds themselves. Starting with the life staff over here, this is my main life staff build. This is what I run primarily all the time, PvE, PvP. I do switch it up slightly depending on maybe the dungeon, mutated, non-mutated, which dungeon it is, the teammates that we have, comp, all of that. But I really don't change it often, really at all, and those are pretty specific cases that I do change it. So really, this is the build. This is what I stick with currently, and until they make some changes to healing or anything like that, this is probably what I'll be sticking with. Sacred Ground, Orb of Protection, Divine Embrace. I know that's pretty common nowadays. Not everyone, though, is going to be running Glowing Focus or Protector's Touch. A lot of times they'll put those two perks on this side. Protector's Touch is pretty huge. It's a 15% fortify, literally, just for hitting someone with a lighter heavy. Really, really easy way to get Fortify up, even if you get it stripped from you using, like a Void Blade or a Void Gauntlet or something like that. You can at least get that Fortify back right away. And then with the Glowing Focus, it just increases your buffs, so the buffs you're applying last quite a bit longer. Which, again, that extra Fortify or that extra length to the Fortify can make a really big difference for you. But this is my main healer build. Feel free to copy it, tweak it as you need it for your use, but this is what I've been using and really, really happy with it. Looking over at the Great Axe, the three abilities I'm using are Charge, Reap, and Gravity Well. More or less just to set up some plays. Obviously, Gravity Well has a really big area where it can pull a bunch of people together. Reap can obviously pull slow people with Crippling Reap. And then the Charge is going to allow us to get in or out of the fight depending on where we need to be, or it can just allow you to reposition or maybe even pull an enemy out of position and then reposition yourself to catch them off guard. So really, really good 3 abilities. I do highly recommend running Bloodlust with this build. Main reason being that the 20% movement speed is extremely nice. Because sometimes you might be a little too deep, not paying attention to behind you. All of a sudden, there's an assassin or something that jumps your backline. You can actually utilize that enemy to get a movement speed to get out of the fight, or you can chase people down with it. Either way, it is a really nice perk to have. And looking at the other side, the Mauler's Fury really isn't that useful. We're really not going to be stacking that much damage with a healer support build, so it's really not that useful, but Bloodlust definitely can come in handy. So that's the Great Axe build I'm using. Feel free to change any of these perks as well, but the 3 abilities are what I recommend, and then Bloodlust in order for this build to work how we want it. Next, let's look over at just kind of the build as a whole and some of the abilities in use. Okay, so it's getting a little dark here in First Light, but I want to go over some of the abilities that we've got. So unlike my hammer build revolves all around building up fortifies, survivability, getting deep into the enemy territory to land those hammers, or utilizing them in order to peel for your team or peel for yourself. With Great Axe, we're not really doing that as much. We are more or less setting up for plays, repositioning a lot quicker with this build, and setting up plays for our DPS to kind of collapse on. So obviously, we have our life staff, we'll have our orb of protection, sacred ground, all of that. You're going to be healing normal. Your positioning as far as a healer goes is going to be pretty normal. You're going to be more in the back line. I like to play around the mages on my team. And the reason for that is, let's say enemies are up here, you're playing with your mages, and you throw a gravity well. So let's say it pulls those two enemies. Your mages, if they see that, they're more than likely going to collapse on that gravity well. You're going to have a chance at a lot more damage. And potentially, that gravity well can set up some plays for DPS to follow up on. Now, let's say that they don't follow up on that gravity well. At that point, you can then throw a gravity well and use your charge to back up, because a lot of times they're going to be upset. So if they are upset, you're then able to separate yourself from that gravity well, or separate yourself from whatever danger it is. So the last ability that I'll go over is the Reap, and Reap is going to allow you to potentially get some kills as a healer, but primarily it is going to slow down the enemy and really allow your team to collapse and finish them off. So let's say you do throw the gravity well. A lot of times people will roll through it, miss it, or whatever. And that's where, if it's a solo target, you can charge them, you can Reap them, and hopefully your team's going to follow up, or if they're low enough in health, you'll take care of them. But as a utility, this Great Axe build is fantastic. Having the perks, the Crippling Reap and all that is really, really essential, because what you're doing is you're looking for people below 50% health. And if you get a Great Axe like mine, we have Crippling Reap and Plagued Crits. Both of those abilities trigger off of enemies being below 50% health. So if we Reap someone, and usually if someone's below 50% health and we Reap them, a lot of times their back is faced towards us, so we get the backstab damage. If you Reap someone and land a crit, you have now slowed them by 50% and given them a 24% disease. And if you follow up with a heavy attack with this particular Great Axe, I'd apply a Rend, but let's just look at the two. So Crippling Reap, Plague Crits, anyone below 50% health, if you land a crit on them with your Reap, which you can do, you're pretty much guaranteeing that that person is not going to be able to escape. And I've seen it with healers, I've seen it with mages, heavy armors. If they're below 50 and they get that 50% slow and your team is around, it is fantastic. So I do highly recommend at least Crippling Reap, if not Plague Crits, on your build. All right, I think that's it. I think we went over the whole build. Went over kind of how I liked it. I've enjoyed this build a lot. It kind of gets you moving a little bit more, a little bit higher mobility using charge compared to the Warhammer. So it is just a little bit different, but I've liked it. I hope you like it as well. If you like this video and want to see more, please hit that subscribe button, thumbs up, all that fun stuff. It does really help me out a lot. I do stream throughout the week, so if you do want to stop by, you can catch me on Twitch. Name over there is Aquarister as well. But thanks for watching today. I really appreciate it. Hopefully I can get some more videos out. And until then, see you in the next one.